Hello, today we will be talking about an introduction to evolution. Evolution is the first topic we're going to talk about, and it's a really interesting topic. When you hear the term evolution, though, there's certain things that tend to come to mind, right? So Darwin is usually one of the first things we think about. Maybe something to do with monkeys and humans. And then there's the phrase survival of the fittest. So these are common things that we think about when we hear the word evolution. So Darwin makes sense, right? That refers to Charles Darwin, who wrote the book, The Origin of Species. And this was based on his observations as a ship's naturalist, as he moved around and he saw different animals in different locations, different plants. But what's interesting is when you look at his text, the book that he wrote, he never actually uses the term evolution. That's the word that we use to describe what he's talking about. When we think about monkeys in terms of evolution, well, it's kind of this idea, right? This picture, the idea that we had monkeys and that some of the monkeys started to be more upright and even more upright, maybe like a Neanderthal, and then finally humans. And that's where humans come from, right? We come from monkeys. And that's not actually what we see in evolution. We don't come from monkeys, right? Monkeys, apes, they're our relatives. They're obviously primates. We share a lot of traits with them, right? We have similar facial structure, similar skeletal structure. We have those long fingers, right? No claws. We've got fingernails. We've got sensitive fingertips. We see those shared traits. So we have a shared ancestor, but we didn't come directly from monkeys. And then the last term is survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest refers to the idea that the fittest organisms are the ones we're going to see. But that's difficult because what do we mean by fittest, right? Is that you're the most fit? You can go to the gym and do the most push-ups? So if we look at a population of golden beetles, some individuals are bigger, kind of chunky guys, and some are more slender morph. How do we figure out who's the fittest? Is that the strongest, the biggest, the fastest, right? Just because this guy's bigger, he's stronger, he can push the smaller ones out of the way to get the food. He's faster, he can run to the food first. Does that make him better? And it comes down to what we mean by fittest. And as a biologist, fittest refers to fitness, and that is not your fitness of your push-ups. That's the number of offspring you produce. How many babies do you make? So the most fittest here isn't going to be the biggest, the strongest. It's going to be who has the most babies. And that depends on your conditions, right? If the main predator of these beetles is a bird, and those birds find it easier to pick up the big guys, these small ones, the narrow ones are too hard to get in their bill, then the smaller, slower, weaker individuals are going to be the most fittest. So we have to be careful for what we mean when we say that. But for us in here, evolution is its more broad definition, how something changes through time. And we see this with a lot of things, right? Your views evolve through time. The food you like evolves through time. When you were a kid, maybe you just ate those chicken nuggets dipped in ketchup and that macaroni and cheese. But your tastes have probably evolved, right? They've changed through time. And now maybe on your pizza you like pineapple and anchovies, not just plain cheese, right? Maybe you like some sriracha in with your macaroni and cheese. So your tastes have evolved. It's the same idea. Darwin referred to this as descent with modifications. He was looking at it from a broader perspective of original organisms and their descendants. So we can look at this briefly with fish here. So we've got our ancestral fish that look like a fish, right? They swim in the water and we see the fins and it looks like a fish. And over time, millions of years, we see changes, right? We start to see those fins become more like limbs, right? The fish can kind of come out of the water a bit. Go another 10 million years and those fins are gone, right? We even lose them on the tail. We've got functional limbs. So we see from the ancestor descendants, that's the descent, with modifications, changes from the original structure, right? We can see this in the fossil record happening over millions of years. We can also see this on a shorter time scale, right? So we're going to go here with dogs. We're going to say that we've got a bunch of dogs, and our goal is to get dogs with spots. So we look at our population of dogs and we say, okay, we're going to take the individuals that have the most spots. We're going to breed those individuals together, and we're going to look at the young. And the puppies that they have, well, they all have spots, but a couple of them have more spots. So then we're going to take those individuals with more spots. We're going to breed those. We're going to get dogs with even more spots. And in this picture, right, this is a simplistic cartoon. We're not breeding brothers and sisters together. You can assume each one of these dogs represents a bigger population here. But the idea is that just in a few generations, we've seen modifications, right? Our ancestor, these are our descendants. That's the descent part. We see the modifications. We see those spots. And when we look at dogs in general, we can see so many different species, right? Where we've made modifications from that ancestor. We've got our big guys here, big for hunting. We've got our small little lap dogs here, which are good for yapping. But we definitely can see those modifications from the ancestor. But when we look at evolution, we have to remember it's not a linear process. It's not driven by a goal. So our previous example with the dogs with more spots, that was a goal, but that's because we were in charge. We weren't just letting a process happen naturally, right? Evolution doesn't have a goal. It's adapting to the current conditions. If you think about your family tree, right? Your family tree is not your great-grandfather to your grandfather to your father to you. That's kind of like your personal lineage. That's your line. But your family tree is way more complex than that, right? It looks more like this. You've got 8 great-grandparents, and from those great-grandparents, there's a whole bunch of other relatives, right, that branch off. And then the next stop would be your grandparents, right, the next generation. And there could be another bunch of people that branch off from that before you get to your parents. And then there's people that branch off, right, if you've got siblings, before it gets to you. So it's not just a straight line. And that's what we see with evolution. It's not that a fish became a salamander, became a cat, became a human. There's a lot more branches, right? We have the common ancestor of all vertebrates, right? Your great-grandparents in the previous situation. Some of those lineages lead to fish. Some of those lineages move onward, and we have the common ancestor for all of the vertebrates. Some of those ancestors gave rise to amphibians. Others gave rise to mammals. And the mammals, some of those became cats. Some of those became primates. So we just have to remember that it's not step by step by step. The goal of vertebrates was not for fish to become humans, right? It was that some organisms were adapted to aquatic conditions, and we see other adaptations, and we see other branches come off from this tree. Okay, before we go any farther, we want to make sure we're clear on the vocabulary associated with evolution. So we'll start with the idea of a gene. A gene is the basic unit of heredity. Technically, it's a sequence of DNA nucleotides, so a row of the nucleotides found on a chromosome. And those nucleotides, they code for a protein or tRNA, a tRNA molecule, or they regulate the transcription of some other molecule. So there's a switch that turns on or off the machinery to code for, to produce a protein or some other product. From our point of view, basic unit of heredity. That's all we're worried about. So it could be a gene for flower color. An allele now is one of 2 or more alternate states of a gene. So the options we have for that gene. So it could be purple, which is dominant in our example, or white, which is recessive. And dominant just means it's the visible, it's the trait that shows. It doesn't mean that purple is better, that it's favored, that it's the good one. It just means if you have a purple allele and a white allele, you're going to appear to be purple. The next term is locus. So locus is just simply the position on a chromosome where that gene is found. So if we look at this, right, this is our pair of chromosomes here, and we see that we have the position, that's the actual locus where that gene is. And we see the 2 different alleles, right? We've got purple here at the top, we've got white here at the bottom. So we've got the gene shown as the alleles at their locus. Little bit more vocabulary, phenotype and genotype. So phenotype is the realized expression of the genotype. It's the physical appearance, the functional expression of a trait. Physical, this is what we see when we look at something, right? So when we look at the flower, the phenotype is going to be purple or it's going to be white. It's the physical expression. The genotype, on the other hand, is the genetic part, the genetic constitution underlying the single trait or set of traits. So these are going to be the letters, the alleles. So are you CC for flower color, right? Big C, big C. Are you big C, little c, or are you little c, little c? This is your genotype. Your genotype, the genes, the genetic components, determine your phenotype, your physical, what we see. So if you're purple here, big C, and another big C, so for two purples, you're going to appear purple. If you're a big C purple and a little c white, we said that purple is dominant, right, shown as a capital letter, so you're going to be purple. And if you're little c, which is white, and little c, which is white, you're going to appear white. You can be homozygous, where your alleles are the same, so you're big C, or little c, or you can be heterozygous, where your alleles are different, so now you're big C, little c. Okay, so now we've got genes and alleles, phenotypes, genotypes, homozygous, heterozygous. We're ready to go in a little bit more detail. So back to descent with modification. How do species change over time? We said they get modified. What is that actual change? How do we go from the fish in the water to a lizard-like animal on land? How do we make that change? Species change over time, right? This is 10 million years and another 10 million years to adapt to environmental differences through the process of natural selection. So as the environment changes, as there are options to be different and it's favored for that environmental condition, then we'll see the change over time. The changes happen through natural selection. Natural selection is when certain individuals that have a specific genetic makeup are favored. And over time, that changes allele frequencies in the population, right? It changes the genes that are present. So as certain genes are favored, certain alleles are favored, we start to see more of them in the population. And this has been proposed as the major mechanism for evolution. So this is how we actually see organisms change. So say, for example, we have a population of mice, okay? So these mice are naturally different shades of brown. We've got some that are really dark, we've got some that are really light, and they live on these lava flows, so they live on the black rocks. Their main predator is a hawk. So these birds are going to come down and they're going to find the individuals that are going to eat them. So over time, some of the mice get eaten by the birds. So the birds are going to choose the individuals they see, and they're going to eat a bunch of those light-colored mice, right? So over time, now the mice that are left, they're going to reproduce. They're going to make the next generation, and we see a change in what's present, right? So our alleles that are present have changed. Here we have lots of black alleles and lots of light-colored alleles. But by the time we have the next generation, there aren't very many light-colored alleles left in our population, right? So we see that change due to that selection. The dark mice are selected for, while the predator is choosing the light-colored mice to eat. We'll pause here for our first weekly review question. Briefly, what is the difference between a gene and an allele? So you need to answer this question. I'm looking for maybe a sentence, a couple phrases, something that shows me that you know the difference between a gene and an allele. Take your answer for this weekly review question, compile it with any other questions that you find in the lectures that have been assigned for this week, and submit them in the manner designated in your syllabus. Back to natural selection. So we kind of see the idea there with that example, right? We saw the bird come in, it's going to take certain individuals out of the population, and we're going to see that population change over time. For natural selection to happen, we need to have phenotypic variation among the individuals in the population. Phenotypic variation, so that's the phenotypes have to be different. What we physically see has to be different. So some of our mice are light-colored, some of our mice are dark-colored. We've got phenotypic variation. That phenotypic variation must have a genetic basis. So we have to be able to see that link, that the genes for the gray mouse, the dark colored mouse, are capital G, right? Capital G, lowercase g. If you have those genotypes, your phenotype is gray. But if you have two little g's, well, then your genotype is going to give you a tan colored mouse. So we see a genetic link there. And then the variation among individuals must result in a difference in fitness. So fitness here is your babies, right? Number of offspring that survive to the next generation. When we look at from the first generation to the second generation, we see a difference, right? We don't see that everybody has the same number of babies from one generation to the next. We see a change. We see more dark individuals than light individuals. So we meet the criteria for natural selection. So we'll take this idea of natural selection to the bigger population. We know that when we look at a population, we see a lot of variation in it, right? There's phenotypic variation, that physical difference. We see dark mice, we see light mice. But we also know there's genotypic variation, right? In the genes, we know that there's big G alleles and little g alleles, and that those combine to give us those different phenotypes. But why? Why is there all of this variation in our population if we just said selection prefers an optimal form, right? That by having that bird, that predator, choosing light-colored individuals, we're selecting for dark individuals. Shouldn't everything here have that same form? Shouldn't everything be dark? Why are there even light mice left? Why is that not happening? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next lecture. So in this lecture, we kind of introduced the idea of evolution. We talked about what evolution is and kind of what it isn't. We've reviewed some general vocabulary, and we introduced the idea of natural selection. As you review the material in today's lecture, please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.